Metallica are the largest heavy metal band ever to come out of the United States, having sold over 85 million albums and toured the globe on countless occasions. Starting with the infamous lineup of Lars Ulrich on drums, James Hetfield on guitar, Dave Mustaine on lead guitar and Ron McGovney on bass, Metallica were destined for stardom right from the start. But where did this awesome group come from? This is the story of a drummer, a singer, 2 lead guitarists and 4 bass players who set out to change music forever. Lars Ulrich was born in Denmark. His father was a local tennis pro and encouraged his young son to take up tennis from an early age. His grandmother, however, had other plans. She gave Lars a drum kit on his 13th birthday, a move that would see the young Dane torn between the tennis court and the drum stool for many years to come. In August 1980, the Ulrich family moved from Denmark to Los Angeles, hoping the sporty Californian location would improve his tennis skills. Lars, however, had other ideas.
Lars, of course, came from Copenhagen, from Denmark. Brought a lot of the European influences in, like being into Motorhead and Diamond Head and Angel Witch, stuff like that.
I'd say in the early days, Lars's chops were a little rough. You know, he definitely had a very ambitious playing style. He wanted to play really hard and heavy.
Lars is a rock star, and he enjoys being a rock star, and so kudos to him.
You know, I look at him now and he's he's an awesome, really talented, mature, developed drummer.
Lars, I'd say, is the public spokesman for the band and more into the business aspect of it.
He can be very professional and very eloquent, and he can be crazy. He can, just mad, just like, ready to go for it, and have fun. I mean, he's just, you know what I mean? He can be a comedian.
Unlike Lars, James Hetfield did not have a happy childhood, relieving the pent-up aggression of his tough upbringing on his battered guitar. James formed a number of bands at both Downey and Bree high schools. When he finally left school, he placed an ad in the Recycler Classifieds looking for other musicians in the area. Lars Ulrich was one of those who responded. Although the pair's initial meeting was not a success, they stayed in contact with each other and eventually, along with Dave Mustaine, formed Metallica.
Early on, I'd say James is more of the stoic member of Metallica.
He would be sitting over in the corner playing the guitar, learning how to play better, learning how to sing and play better.
He's reserved at times and sometimes doesn't talk a lot. Other times he's very humorous, very witty, very down to earth.
Hetfield always does this when he sees somebody. He bites his upper lip and looks at you like that.
James Hetfield is intense, and he always has been intense.
With Lars's Danish background, a number of different musical influences crept into the band. In particular, the heavy metal coming out of Great Britain, which had a huge following throughout Europe during the early 1980s.
What we were very influenced by, which is called the new wave of British heavy metal, was sort of hard rock and metal's direct answer to that movement a few years ago, where metal sort of was brought back down to, you know, from the 70s, you had all the dinosaur bands and everything was sort of very grand and rock stars and all that. And then in 1979-80, the new wave of British metal came about, and sort of everything was brought back down to the streets again, and bands were doing their own thing and a little more aggressive and then maybe a little faster and just a little more sort of ballsy and gutsy. And I think that's where most of our influences lie.
James and Lars were into a heavier style of rock and found life in the Los Angeles music circles frustrating. The LA music scene of the early 80s seemed more about image than musical ability.
There was a metal scene in LA, and it wasn't quite what they were into at the time. There was Motley Crue's going on and other bands that quite what they weren't looking for. But up here in San Francisco, there was a more metal type of crowd, more of what they were into.
You know, they were playing the LA scene, and LA was all, you know, glam metal. You know, the whole spandex, and you know, people call it hair bands now. That term didn't exist back then. You just were glam rock, you know, and and they hated that scene. Although they did play with Rat. I heard Rat was one of the few bands that were not afraid to play with Metallica. But you know, and Rat were on the original Metal Massacre.
The band were really struggling to fit into the LA scene. This caused problems with their bass player at the time, Ron McGovney.
Metallica were looking for another bass player. They weren't happy with Ron McGovney, the guy they had before Cliff, and they had seen Cliff play at the Whiskey with his band Trauma, and he stuck out completely from the other band members with his wild headbanging stuff. And they made a point. They said, that's the guy we want to get in our band. And Cliff lived in the Bay Area, which was like a second home for Metallica. They didn't like all the poser scene down in LA anyway. But they tried to get Cliff to come down to LA and join them down there, but Cliff didn't want anything to do with Los Angeles. He was against all the poser scene down there, you know. So they said, if I'm going to join your band, you guys got to move up here, which they did in a second, since they liked the Bay Area.
So they decided to do that. You know, they kicked out Ron McGovney. Well, I think Ron McGovney like kind of heard that they were trying to get Cliff, and Ron just wound up quitting, and became a plumber, last I heard, or something.
Chuck Billy is the lead singer of Testament and has fond memories of Cliff Burton and Metallica moving up from LA.
Actually knew Cliff before he got in Metallica. I used to see him in his band Trauma. They actually played at like our high school, you know, back in those days. So we all knew who Cliff was, and when we heard Cliff was going to get the Metallica gig, you know, it was pretty shocking. And then when they were going to relocate up here,
The reason they moved up here is because Lars loved it up here. James seemed to like it up here. They got so much better response in San Francisco, Berkeley, the Bay Area than they ever did in LA. They felt unwanted, I guess, in LA.
Cliff Burton had lived in the San Francisco Bay Area all his life. He had started playing the bass guitar in 1976 and 6 years later joined the band Trauma. The band never achieved great success, except in bass playing circles, where Burton's talents were legendary.
First time I saw Cliff Burton he was in a band called Culprit from the Northwest. And they were quite good, but they were very standard Judas Priest, Iron Maiden-ish. But they had this hairy, jeans-covered behemoth going all over. Just an amazing, one-of-a-kind bass player at the time. And everybody noticed him. Everybody was like amazed by his bass playing for this pretty generic band. So you could see that his star was rising, and this band was. They weren't bad. They just weren't going anywhere. And then the guys in Metallica saw him soon after.
He was the most extraordinary bass player I've ever seen in my life. It's almost like when he played the bass, he was playing the guitar.
He's the kind of guy to give you the shirt off his back, and I had a little connection with him because we both like to smoke a little reefer once in a while. Cliff loved to smoke weed, and he didn't care what anybody thought of him. He wore like bell bottoms and stuff even when they weren't in style.
I was living in Oklahoma at the time, and I saw them play a little club in 1986, during the Master of Puppets tour. I was right in front, and I was 16 at the time, or maybe 15. And Cliff Burton was right in front of me. I mean, I was like touching his bell bottoms. And he drank half of a beer, and he handed me the rest of it. And I still have that cup to this day. Back then, I used to play in a band called Blind Illusion, and we were doing a show at the famous Ruby's Inn. And we'd kind of messed around in the studio, with Am I Evil for fun. And we thought, well, it would be cool if we could get Cliff or somebody to play with us, just for that song. Maybe we could do it, And called Cliff up and said, hey, we're playing tomorrow night at Ruthie's. And we want to play Am I Evil? Would you want to come up and jam with us? And he was like, sure, no problem. And so the next night, it's like, okay. And we're getting ready to play the song. And he walks up on stage, and I'll never forget it. And he gets up there, he puts his foot on the monitor, swings his head down, hair's coming down, this fire hair. He swings it back and looks over at the drummer to signal the cue for the song. And it was just awesome.
Hi, welcome to San Francisco, the home of Metallica. And I still remember the day we met.
The San Francisco metal scene became electric in the 80s, not only seeing the spawning of Metallica, but also Exodus, Testament, and Heathen.
Let's see, the Bay Area metal scene was pretty quiet in 1980. There was like Y&T and maybe a few other small bands. By 81, there was Metal Mondays at the old Waldorf, and those got more and more famous every Monday. Motley Crue played, and all the cheesy bands played, but heavier and heavier bands started showing up to these things. And Metallica heard about it, and they started playing at the old Waldorf, where the Metal Mondays were. And we all used to trade tapes of the rarest bands we could find all over to England, to New York, to, I guess, to Denmark, or wherever Lars was living, Newport Beach. And so me and Brian Slagle or various other people in 80, 81, before we started our magazines, were, everybody was trading all these amazing bands. And I think that inspired Brian to start his magazine before he started Metal Blade Records.
I mean, the Bay Area metal scene was legendary. I know Europe, used to just think, the Bay Area was a place to be. I learned that the Bay Area was a place to be. It was a very exciting time, when Metallica first came up here, then spawned all these other bands doing this new thing called thrash metal.
When you went to a show here in San Francisco, I think the Pit is what it was called and is called today, and it goes round in a circle, round and round and round. Anything goes when you're in that pit. You could get hit, punched, anything can happen to you. So it's quite dangerous at the time to even be at a show sometimes. It was like you're at war. At any given moment, you could be hit from behind.
Finally, the young bands that were coming up, trying to get into the clubs were finally opening their doors. And that started really with the Metal Monday, which was sponsored by this radio station out here, KRQR, and that was with Bill Graham Presents. And it was really a way for new bands to come out. I remember in my band trying to get a gig before this all started. The Keystones were all around. There was 3 Keystones clubs.
There was the Stone, there was the Keystone, the Berkeley Stone, and then there was the Omni, the Mabuhay, which is traditionally a punk club. The on Broadway, Broadway in San Francisco was sort of the epicenter of San Francisco metal at the time, and all these bands, great bands, come up. Most notably Exodus, and then there was Death Angel, there was Heathen, and I learned really quick. Motley Crue was not tolerated in that scene. I mean, like Exodus. Like if you went to an Exodus show, like in '84 wearing a Motley Crue shirt, you would got the crap beat out of you.
Did see Metallica was right here. This is the backstage door behind me of the old Waldorf, which used to have a metal night called Metal Mondays. And that's where I first saw them, and they weren't the reason that I came to the concert to see them. I came to see Law's Rocket, another band from back in that era. And from that night on, they captured me.
Metallica was a very determined band that wasn't going to let anything stand. Broken strings, broken drumsticks, amps going out on, which most of the time they would borrow stuff from everybody. I used to lend Metallica gear all the time in the early days.
One thing that helped set them apart from all the other bands is that they were incredibly fast, and they would get really, really drunk before they played. They were known as a young metal attack, and they just had a lot more aggression than most of the bands back then.
The most stunning shows I saw were the first two in March of '83 at the Stone with Cliff and with Dave, and it just happened to be a passing of ships. Those were the few they played together. And Dave had this amazing charisma. Cliff had this amazing charisma. James had this amazing charisma. Lars was hilarious on drums. So the four of them, that was the best I thought it would ever be.
It was just electric. You know, it was electric what they were doing. And I remember just watching James, and it was almost like he was possessed. And it was with Dave Mustaine, and it's, you know, and it was like, whoa. I mean, I remember seeing them and thinking, these guys, they're gonna go.
It's 7:49 in the morning, and you have ESP because we're going to play Diamond Head, and then we're going to play more Iron Maiden.
I live for you.
We love you, baby.
You too.
Bye-bye.
With the lack of media around the metal scene, Ron Quintana started up Metal Mania magazine. He remembers discussing with Lars some possible titles.
Me and Lars I was doing a magazine and laying out names, and Lars actually had a bunch of names. He was going to name his band like Red Vet, Blitz crap or something. He had the worst, most generic, Americanized like car names and the hot rod names, Trans Am names, and I had a list of names like Metal Death, Skull Orchard, and Metallica was in there. And he goes, oh, that's a cool name. What are you going to call your magazine? How about Metal Mania? That was one on my list, and so I ended up doing Metal Mania in '81. And a few months later, I heard about this band Metallica. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Metallica became an integral part of the metal scene in San Francisco. This included a reputation for throwing wild parties. The only problem, somebody really was spoiling the party, their lead guitarist, Dave Mustaine.
The best parties I remember in the early days with Metallica were usually at their house. And everybody showed up at their house. And the best one was probably the last one before their first New York tour where they were going to record the first album.
And me and one of my bandmates went over there to see them off and stuff. And, you know, it was crazy as usual, you know.
People would be drinking and you know, screwing in the bedrooms and, you know, just throwing up on the walls and all that stuff. And okay, I mean, it wasn't completely disgusting, but I mean, these were some pretty over-the-top parties, and they were like, you know what, that's cool.
As the night progressed, Dave started becoming more rambunctious. I turned around and I went to leave, and Dave like put his arm around me again, and all of a sudden I feel this like pinching in the back of my neck, and he had bit me on the back of my neck.
And that's when it was looking like the end of Dave's days, not to us, but amongst the band. And so they asked Exodus's manager to become their manager. And at that party, Exodus came up to me and asked me to replace their manager. And that party was the most drunken, crazy party. Me and Paul Bailoff ended up ripping, and Rich Skitch Birch ended up ripping foam out of a car that some poor headbanger had left in their driveway. And we did that for about 3 or 4 hours in the morning. And the owner came back and got so mad he took Lars' stereo as hostage. So Lars had to pay all this money to get the car fixed to get his stereo back when he came back, after recording the first album.
Harold O was the band's official photographer. After photo shoots with the band, he would often invite them over to his house to check out the images. James Hetfield, however, was not always impressed with the results.
Well, I had a keg party at my house a long time ago, and James showed up after the gig, and I showed him one of the pictures that we had that I had taken of them goofing around. And a friend of mine, Ron Quintana, he had put it on the cover of his magazine, Metal Mania. It was a picture of James and Kirk in bed together, and they had put El Duce from the Mentors, which is this horribly fat, ugly, round guy that everybody used to get a kick out of. But they had gone and used that as the cover of the magazine, and James hadn't seen it before. And I didn't realize at the time they wanted me to keep those pictures kind of to myself. It was like a private fun kind of thing. So I showed the magazine to James, and he had a big smile on his face. He thought it was great, and then all of a sudden he realized that what the picture was of, and he kicked me in the stomach, and we almost got in a brawl, and he said I was never taking photos for them again after that. But once the alcohol wore off and we started talking about it, it was all cool. But basically, Ron Quintana had gone ahead and used this picture without me knowing.
Dave Mustaine, their dominant lead guitarist, was a force to be reckoned with, both on and off the stage. Very few people would ever cross him.
Well, Dave's a strong personality, and Lars is a strong personality, and James is a strong personality. And I think you can get so many so many little tempests in a teapot before it starts becoming a full-blown hurricane.
Dave was a very strong guitar presence on stage. From the minute he went on to the minute he went off. From what I remember, he was just nasty in your face, and you were constantly, personally myself, paying attention to him.
The early gigs with Dave Mustaine were incredibly drunken, powerful, and Dave had a charisma that was missing afterwards, but they gelled better without him.
The one thing that I remember the most, we were doing a practice with this band Warning I was in at the time, and they showed up and Dave just threw the garage door open and just blew in, like a ton of bricks, and he's like, "Let's jam now." And we had been done for like an hour or so, and there's no way we could have done that without having the cops come and everything. And he was just very, very insistent on doing it, and we did like one song, and sure enough, the cops came. So, Dave usually got what he wanted, regardless of what the consequences were.
The band had been picked up by Mega Force Records and flew out to New York to record their first album. The problems with Dave, however, became too much.
They'd already had about 2 demos recorded. There was the Zero demo, then there was the first demo, then there was the infamous No Life to Leather demo, which got around. Johnny Zazula at Megaforce Records got a hold of it and really liked it. Wanted to sign the band to his new label he was forming called Megaforce. And actually the band flew out to New York to meet with Johnny Z and get ready to record this album. And that's where they got introduced to the guys in Anthrax who were just starting out. And Anthrax let Metallica stay at this rehearsal place where Anthrax jammed, and Metallica didn't have no place to stay, so they stayed there. And it was during that time, there was all these problems with Dave Mustaine just drinking all the time. They'd seen Kirk Hammett playing with Exodus, and they thought Kirk would be a good addition. Kirk was an original member of Exodus, and they'd actually played some shows together with Metallica and stuff like that. So they kind of called Kirk up, because Exodus really wasn't doing nothing at the time, and asked Kirk if he wanted to join the band. Kirk's like, oh yeah, oh my God! Kirk was all excited about the opportunity, and they had him flying into New York, and the same day they had to tell Dave Mustaine, "You're out of the band." They all had to. Who's gonna tell Dave? They all got together and around Dave when he woke up, and they go, "Look, Dave, man, you're out of the band," and Dave's all, he didn't know what to do, and they gave Mustaine a bus ticket back to LA. He had to ride a Greyhound all the way back from New York to LA, which is probably a good 3 or 4 days ride on a bus.
I think it was fated that Dave Mustaine would not stay in Metallica. I can't conceive of the explosive personalities of Hetfield and Ulrich and Mustaine staying together. It's just too volatile a mix.
Dave Mustaine returned from New York, eventually forming the hugely successful Megadeth.
The animosity that Mustaine had for Metallica, there was a lot of that in the beginning. Like the first show they played, they went over so well. There was people out there chanting, "Kirk Hammett sucks! Kirk Hammett sucks!" And Dave ran out there and go grab the mic. "Yeah, I think he fucking sucks too."
David White remembers Kirk getting the call,
and he was the only one they called, and it was that's pretty exciting. Here's this band getting ready to actually sign, and at the time, we were all kind of staying at the house, and John Marshall actually was renting a room at the house, and they went over all the riffs, on the demo, and Kirk worked with John, and they kind of helped, just kind of going over that stuff, and so that Kirk could just kind of get it, and then so he'd be prepared when he went over there.
Kirk Hammett grew up in the Berkeley area of San Francisco. In 1981, Kirk formed the hugely popular Exodus. David White again remembers Kirk from his early years.
Yeah, at school, he was pretty quiet. But yeah, he always had his guitar, always. And that was always the thing, The Exodus started very early on, and we were all in bands. We were all early on in high school. A lot of us were in bands, and it was a little bit of competition, and there was a lot of good guitar players out there. Kirk, as far as his guitar playing, I know that somewhere along the line it's just he began to play. Maybe it was he wanted for the girls, I don't know. But as as time progressed, even with Metallica, he wanted to improve, and that's when he sought out Joe Satriani and began to learn more theory. And just excel.
Kirk's pretty crazy. Kirk Hammett is a crazy collector dude, which I can identify with because I'm a collector.
For years, I've been trying to get Kirk to do a formal interview on camera for a reality check, and he was always kind of ducking me. Well, and that time's not right, this and that, but I'll do one. I promise I will do one. And I finally corralled him at the BAMI Awards, which is California Music Awards, and that's basically a regional thing, California. And Metallica had won some awards, and he was a presenter. And so I saw him. I said, "So we're finally going to do that interview you've been promising me?" And he goes, "You know what? Absolutely, we're going to do it tonight." I said, "Great." So he had a handler guy, was press guy, and the press guy is trying to corral him over to either MTV or VH1, who were waiting to do an interview, and he was ignoring me completely, and Kirk, was talking to different people and so on and so forth, and the guy was grabbing him by the elbow and says, "Come on over here, VH1's waiting." And he goes, No, wait just a second. This guy over here, I'm doing an interview with him." He goes, "But VH1, they're waiting." And he's like, "They let him wait. I promised this guy an interview for a long time. He's a friend of mine. I'm doing the interview with him first.
Yep. How are you, bro?
Good, how you been, man?
Finally to have Kirk on Reality Check.
It's been years.
It's been days and days and days.
How you feeling?
Feeling good. I stopped drinking.
You really? You're on the wagon?
I'm on the wagon and my nerves are shot, but other than that, you know.
Kirk likes to fish, and a good friend of mine, Alvin Petty, who is actually the artist on the Creeping Death EP, he likes to fish. We all like to fish. And Les Claypool, we used to all go fishing from time to time. You know, sometimes we would catch a fish or whatever, but that really seemed to be something that he would look forward to.
When they were recording their first album, there was no time to relax. They were working hard and certainly not leading the rock and roll lifestyle.
The calls that would come back, I mean, they had some tough times. You know, as a lot of people know, I mean, they slept in their studio and gigged, but I mean, you know, things were going, and it was just an exciting time. You know, I mean, during those times when you're young, you just kind of endure the rotten part of it. You know, not getting much sleep. I know that it's one of those things where you kind of drink yourself to sleep sometimes.
They were living a pretty Spartan lifestyle. They didn't really, they're all sleeping on the floor and, you know, just eating cold cuts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Metallica's first album, Kill 'Em All, was released in 1983 to great commercial praise and success. The band had finally made it. The band would eventually record and release 3 albums in quick succession: Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and the massive album Master of Puppets. With worldwide success seemingly just round the corner, things suddenly turned for the worst.
I was actually staying at Kirk's house, at his mother's house, and his sister and I were getting ready to move into a house because we were going to have a baby. And that morning, it was probably 4:30 in the morning, 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, the phone rang, and her mother answered the phone, and we just heard her, you know, in distress. Oh my God, and we thought something happened to Kirk. And she, you know, she got the news, and she came in and told us that Cliff had gotten killed. And our hearts just sunk. You know, it was just awful. It was awful. And that day will live with me forever.
One evening, the band were travelling on a tour bus between Stockholm and Copenhagen. During the night, the coach had a tragic accident. Cliff was thrown out of the tour bus window and crushed.
I heard all the varying reports that the driver fell asleep, that there was black ice. And I guess Cliff had played cards that night with the band on the bus. And they had pulled cards to see who would get that bunk, because whoever pulled the card would get to pick whichever bunk they had. I guess that was more comfortable or whatever. So Kirk originally had that bunk, and they pulled cards. Whoever got the highest card got to pick whichever bunk they want, and Cliff picked Kirk's bunk.
I was on my way to do a radio show here at KUSF, and I had to break the news to most people didn't know, but we had learned earlier that day that Cliff had died in an accident, and the rest of the band members were injured. And that was September 27th, 1986, one of the saddest days I can remember, because most metalheads at that time, that day, at that stage, had never experienced anyone dying. So everybody who knew him or just seen him play was just devastated. That was like JFK getting shot in '63. I think it devastated the metal community for months afterwards. They were just like, whoa.
When the tour bus wreck happened, I thought it was a rumor at first because, Metallica were starting to get really trendy, and there was people like coming up to me acting like, they read this in Hit Parader magazine or they heard this on MTV, and I'd call people I knew in San Francisco and I'd get the real facts, because I heard a rumor that on the Master of Puppets tour with Ozzy that James Hetfield got hit in the face with a bottle and got his front teeth knocked out, and that was completely false. So when I heard Cliff Burton killed, I go, yeah, right, but I called the Record Vault actually, which was the big metal record store here, and they confirmed to me, yeah, Cliff died, and then I just flipped out. I was like, I couldn't believe it. No, Cliff, man, no way. And then I saw it on MTV, and it was just.
Testament had been looking forward to the 27th of September, as this was meant to be the happiest day of their lives.
I remember the day when I heard the news of Cliff, because it was, I think, the biggest day of our life because of a band, because John and Marcia Zazzulo were in town to see us. We were trying to get a record deal, and they had signed Metallica on Megaforce, so we were like, that's a label we wanted to be with. And when they arrived, we noticed that they were really bummed out and they were really saddened, and they broke the news to us what happened. We were just blown away because here we are, our metal hero was killed the night before, and we were just like, it was so heavy to us, just that fact. But on the other hand, we're thinking, God, now we got to audition for Johnny to try to get signed.
This is a memorial for Cliff Burton at Marshall School. Some friends of his put this here for him, and this is the only memorial that they have anywhere for him. It's in a really well secluded area here, and it's pretty much the closest thing to a memorial that Cliff has anywhere. So his mom taught here at school. This is Marshall Middle School, and it's just like a tribute to him, and pretty much the biggest guy to ever come out of Castro Valley.
The band closed the door on their public lives for nearly a year. However, they knew their fans were keen for a Metallica return, and although the pain of losing Cliff was still there, they started the arduous task of looking for a new bass player.
It was open auditions to replace Cliff, and Jason Newsted, Les Claypool, every guitarist in the Bay Area and LA, and probably around the States, every bass player, guitarist would play bass, anything to try out for Metallica back in '87.
I was actually going to do it as well, and then I thought to myself, no. I mean, I know a lot of people that went down and tried it out, but none of them were compatible with Metallica. I don't know absolutely what they were looking for, but I don't think they were looking to replace Cliff as far as like copying him down to the T.
Word got around and they were doing auditions, and one thing led to the next, and went and played. There was 50 other guys trying out for the gig or whatever, and it just happened. Once I had the opportunity, that was that. It had to be me.
Jason Newsted was playing with another band, but on hearing Metallica were auditioning for a new bass player, learnt their entire back catalogue. After the auditions, Metallica took Jason to Tommy's joint in San Francisco. In this booth, they told Jason he was their new bass player.
But Jason came in the band. He was in formerly a band called Flotsam and Jetsam from Arizona, and he tried out with a bunch of local people, and Jason was the man for the job.
Right when he first joined the band, about a week later, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine named Kevin, who sold gear at Guitar Center, and had just sold Jason his new bass gear, and he called me and asked me if I would be able to deliver it to his house because their trucks couldn't do it for a couple of days. So of course I jumped on the opportunity to come down, pick up his stuff, and take it over to San Pablo, near where the band was practicing. They had a house there, and that's where I brought it, and I'll never forget, he was so happy that I brought it to him that he insisted that I stay while he set it all up and played, and the first thing that he played for me was For Whom the Bell Tolls.
I saw James and Lars at a Motorhead show at the I-Beam in San Francisco, and I talked to him about, you know, what's his name? Jason. Jason what? Jason. That's all they would say.
Their new bass player spent a long time living in the shadows of Cliff Burton, but over time both the band and the fans began to accept him.
I don't know if there would have been a good time or a bad time. The thing is that the ugly fate that brought it around was not a good foot to get off on. And so I had to battle for years before I got the respect at all to start from there. You know what I mean? It was really like quite huge shoes to fill, not just in the playing aspect, but in the way that there was a lot expected of me, and it was a constant barrage of tests.
With a complete lineup once again, the band enjoyed many years of success. But unlike other heavy metal acts, their sound changed over the years.
The first 3 albums were, to me, more from the heart, as far as I'm concerned. That they were just destined to write that material to, like, stick it in your face and take over. That's all they cared about, was the music and touring and bringing it out to you.
I think that it's a natural growth over time to change, and they've changed in many different forms. From the real heavy days of Kill 'Em All, and then to come out with Ride the Lightning, which was still kind of that feel, but the songwriting was that much better. And then to Master of Puppets, which is my personal favorite, which is just brilliant. It's a brilliant album. You know, and then of course they lost Cliff, so then you have Injustice for All, which the riffs on there are incredible as well.
I think the first 10 years after Kill 'Em All came out, I think they were really pushing to find the boundaries of where they could go musically.
And then the Black Album, which was much more of a commercial success. But I really like that album a lot because it still has that heaviness that they've always had, but with really cool, strong song structure, and really, you know, catchy songs, but not so commercial that it would make you sick.
Up through the 80s, we wrote a record every year and a half to 2 years, and then we wrote the Black Album in 1990, and then we went on a tour that never ended. So by the time we got back to writing again in the fall of '94, it was close to 4.5, 5 years.
You see a kind of a progression in complex arrangements and different styles getting introduced here and there, and I think they really grew musically as far as getting out of, no one wants to hear a band that just releases the same album over and over again.
As they've gone on, the newer stuff, Load and Reload, there's a lot of good stuff on those records. They're not my favorites, but a lot of the songs that I maybe didn't like at first have grown on me, and I like that. If you listen to it, it's like, wow, that's awesome, and then that's it. But if it's something that's, it's okay, or whatever, then next you hear it a couple more times, or you hear it in a certain place or whatever, and it does something.
Maybe it's like they've found their sound, they've found their voice, and so that I think they've been really focused more on, okay, compositionally, what can we do that expresses our style and everything in a way that kicks ass, but isn't just a retread of something that we've done already.
It just goes back to the fact that you just can't please everyone. You just have to follow your instincts and follow what satisfies you creatively.
it was during stadium gigs where Metallica came alive. The band are well known for mixing and socialising with their road crew, as their lead truck driver remembers.
My name's Kurt Williams, and I was Metallica's lead truck driver for 11 years. Known the guys since they were pretty young.
They're a live touring machine, and they enjoy touring, and they love being on the road, and they love playing.
The scheduling for touring is quite hectic. Me being lead driver would haul the rigging, which is always the first truck in, the last truck out at night. So, and some of the mileages were long distance, and so I'd have to be getting right with it because I was the last one out of there, and I'd have to be the first one in and unload and organize the rest of the trucks to coordinate them to come in as need be.
Metallica live, they just really have a magic about them, and you know, it just comes across. I mean, they're not fluffing up their hair, you know, really, you know, there's no makeup involved. It's very raw.
We haul the band gear, wardrobe, some events, the catering, definitely the sound system and the lighting. Like I said, it depends on the size of the tour, of how big it could be. Some of their tours are big enough where we have multiple trucks that haul the steel for the outdoor venues for big stadiums.
They really pay attention to detail, and they've always had a great sound man. Always had a great, you know, great sounding, you know, concerts. And when you tour 360, you know, odd days a year, you just can't help but be, you know, tight and good and just be really on top of it.
And if they were moving from the hotel bar or something, if I was there, they'd say, "Kurt, come on, let's go," and you know, we just go out and party for the night, which is always fun with the band because naturally, you know, everything was given to them. You know, everybody was just trying to take care of the band, but they'd never forget us and turn around and say, "You take care of our friends," you know.
I got 10th row tickets to see Metallica open up for Ozzy, and I watched this young group of guys just blow the old veterans right off the stage. I mean, they were even louder than Ozzy was. They were so loud that my ears rang probably for 2 days.
And Lars told me, you know, the reason they kept going out when they didn't have a new album was just to keep their fans fresh, you know, to keep them, you know, where they're interested or, you know, don't wander off with all these new bands. And they've always kept that, you know, theory of just keeping their fans with them. And I think their fans are going to be strong as ever.
Metallica have had a number of accidents while touring. During these times, they've had to rely on Kirk Hammett's guitar tech, John Marshall, to fill in on a number of occasions.
Hetfield in particular, you know, I remember seeing it when the first time he broke his wrist in a skateboarding accident. That was like, you know, during the Master of Puppets tour, when they had to have a roadie fill in.
You know, John Marshall, who was Kirk's guitar tech, who was a great guitar player, was right there. And you know, I don't know how that worked out because they were on the road, but they asked him to fill in and play the guitar parts, the rhythm parts. And I guess that worked out pretty good. I think he was a little more behind the scenes that time, the first time. When James got burned, John was able to come out and play.
Although the band continue to love playing stadium gigs, they sometimes find these occasions too choreographed.
It becomes a show with cues and things you have to do, and you have to go stand there, because if you don't stand there, then something's going to blow up over here and all these type of things. And sometimes it's nice to get just really back to basics.
Even with their worldwide reputation as masters of the giant stadium gig, it's refreshing to know that Metallica still relish playing small clubs. A reminder perhaps of the times before they made it big.
Playing small places like clubs is a lot of fun because it gives you a chance to get so much. What you thrive on being in a band is eye contact and the energy that you get back from the people you can see. And when you actually have eye contact with like 600 people or whatever, that's just a great thing.
Well, a band like of Metallica's caliber is going to do a small gig like that to get in touch back with their friends. Because, you know, you're going to be playing these big arenas, and you can't say hey to your buddies while you're playing. You can't, like, play this room playing for your friends, you know, which is, like, something that's really important to any kind of rock and roll band. It's like, you know, your friends' recognition. You know, it's like, what are you going to do after you play a 50,000-seat arena? You can't go back, you know, or out to the crowd and go, hey, find your friends really quick. What'd you think? You know, it's like if you play a place for 100 people, you can try out things. You can do things you didn't do, you know, don't always do, and have a good time. It's a party.
The funnest things Metallica's done that I've been to are the Kill 'Em All, Four Horsemen, one-off, unannounced gigs at Ruthie's or at the MAB in '84 and '85 and various other ones later. Those have always been the most fun because it's like old reunion, like a high school reunion. All the old people get back together and to go see this amazing band playing, having fun.
The show that I remember the best is that was the Four Horsemen show, which was, you know, kind of a discreet thing. They come off the road and they wanted to do something that was more for people that they knew. It wasn't just for the big grand concert type thing, and that was at the MAP.
This guy Bob was like, look, I want to do this night, and I was like, I usually don't do Tuesdays, but he's like, look, I will pay you. You know, I have a label coming to see my band, and I was like, okay, I'll do a Tuesday for you. If you can pay me enough to give money for my sound man and my door person, we can do a Tuesday. That Tuesday show rolls around, and I couldn't be there. I hired someone to do sound for that show and watch the door. And me and Joanne were at the other club we were booking, our metal club. And this guy comes up to me and asks me who was playing at Chemo's, that bar Spun was at. And I mentioned Spun and some other bands, and he said, well, you know who Spun is? And I was like, some dumb band. He's like, well, no, they're probably the biggest metal band in San Francisco. And to me, I was like, what, Metallica's playing at Chemo's? And he's like, I can't say. And I was like, that's kind of weird, but what if that's true? And so I grabbed Joanne and mentioned that to her, and we called over there, and it was packed. So we're like, something's going on. So we just grabbed a cab, went over there, and sure enough, the place, like, we walk in, and Sean Penn is downstairs. And we're like, something's going on. So we run upstairs where the bands play, and right then, Metallica came on. And it turned out that guy Bob I was talking to on the phone was Bob Rock.
With 11 years of success and a raft of hit albums, Jason Newsted finally decided to leave Metallica. He continued to work on a number of other projects, including Echo Brain and Voivod.
We're rolling.
Hi there, I'm Jason. I'm Dylan.
Right.
From Echo Brain.
Notoriously picked on and ruthlessly dumped on by them. Matter of fact, that was a rumor I was hearing in the early 90s that Jason just so bad wanted to quit Metallica and do something like Voivod. He was a big fan of the band Voivod, who are a great band. And I was hearing that, but you know, he just, how could you walk away from a band like that successful, making that much money? You know, so that's why he stayed on. You know, that was a rumor I heard. Then sure enough, he finally quit the band, and guess what? He's playing with Voivod now.
I remember when Jason left the band, and somebody was asking me at the time, you know, when are they having tryouts for a new bass player? Why don't you go down there and try out? And I'm like, hey, listen, you know, I don't know why Jason left, but it's got to be a pretty good reason.
Jason is an amazing guy to play, to put up with that band for that long. And I wish him luck with Voivod. That's great.
In July 2002, after a 2.5-year break, brought on partly by illness and exhaustion, Metallica finally held auditions for a new bass player. This was considered partly a publicity stunt, but also to see if they could find a replacement.
Yeah, in July I emceed in a bassathon where the band jammed with people to be Metallica's bass player. And so anybody could come up and jam and join in, and I announced it, and it was a lot of fun. It was kind of like a big wrestling match, and they'd get up there and they'd play their licks, and there was several really good ones, good musicians, and Elena was definitely the best.
I volunteered to go first because I think people were kind of nervous, and I said, okay, I'll go first. And it was kind of set up an unplugged situation where everything was in a circle and all the people were around, all the equipment was set up, and the band's gear was set up. So I was standing there ready to go, and the band hadn't showed up. And I saw Lars sitting over, like, across from me, and he was, like, sitting there, and they're, okay, you ready to go? And I said to Lars, aren't you going to play? And I misunderstood, and I thought that the band was going to play with each of us as we, you know, had our little rounds and auditions. And it turns out that we had to play with the CD. So here I am standing there by myself in this circle with everyone staring at me, and then the CD starts. And it was Seek and Destroy. We were able to pick what we wanted to do. And I said, okay, I see I have to play to the CD and not with the band. So I started playing, and I noticed that I knew what was happening. It wasn't sounding right, it was out of tune. And what the situation was is the old albums, Kill 'Em All Through Master, they used to play in E, 440, tuned to E. But since then, they've tuned down to E flat, the low string. The bass I was playing was tuned to E flat, but the album was, of course, E, because it was the album. And so it was sounding terrible. And I'm going to get gonged. People are going to tell me boo and leave. So I stopped and I said, wait, the bass is out of tune. And their tech guy, they were confused for a moment. I said, yeah, the bass is tuned to E flat and I'm playing to the CD and it's, an E. So we stopped the competition and I was like, oh no, because I just didn't want them to think, oh, she sucks. And it wasn't me, it was the bass being out of tune. And so he finally figured out, oh no, he didn't know that either. So he tuned it up to E and then it was perfect. And I did the first round and everyone, cheers and stuff. And then the next people who signed up, they all did theirs and they either got booed or cheered, And then whoever made it through the first rounds got to play again. I think I did No Remorse the second time. And then to sum it up, at the very end, they picked the winner. The crowd picked the winners, and it was down to Andrew and me. And I thought there'd be one winner, but it actually ended up being two. And each of us winners got to play a full song with the band. And I did Seek and Destroy, and Andrew did Creeping Death. And it was very exhilarating. It was like I was in another world. It was incredible.
In the end, the band decided to go for a well-known bass player by the name of Robert Trujillo. They had spotted Robert playing in Ozzy Osbourne's band during the previous years.
Oh, Robert Trujillo is this amazing bass player. He was just with Ozzy, but he's played with a lot of people. And first time I saw him or heard of him, I saw him playing with Suicidal Tendencies about 10 years ago. And they were one of my favorite bands, and he was just like this. He blew all the other band members away. He was so good.
Yeah, Robert Trujillo is a very, very good bass player. And he would be more along Cliff's lines. He's a true, bass player and stuff. I think that's good for them.
It's good to know that they found a bass player, and I know that this guy is great. He's a great bass player. So we'll see.
In 2003, and finally with a complete lineup, Metallica once again set out to take the heavy metal world by storm.
We won't ever really know until all four of us get into the room and start hashing out ideas that we ever know what sort of direction the music will take. And if it steers into rock opera or something totally ridiculous like that, why not? If it works for us, why not?
Around for as long as they have, just because they stayed pretty much true to their roots. A lot of people think that the newer stuff isn't as good as their older stuff or whatever, but they've always done what they wanted to do.
They'll always be a force to be reckoned with. They're probably going to be like the Rolling Stones. 20 years from now, they'll still be going in their 50s or whatever.
I've actually wondered what the next 10 years would look like for Metallica, because clearly they don't have the same the same sense of purpose that I think was apparent from the beginning. We want to really make the world heavier. We want to kick some people's asses. I think people's asses have been kicked.
The next 5 years of Metallica is probably anyone's guess, only because of look what they've done in the last 10 years. And you could take that and think, okay, that's what they're going to do, but then you look at the last 20 years and like, who knows?
The future of Metallica right now is really in the hands of their management team, their label, and themselves as a band.
Whether there's a metal scene or not, Metallica will always be around because they've just, hit that pinnacle.
The position Metallica hold in the history of music is undeniable, as their influence and inspiration are still being heard today with the resurgence of heavy rock. Long may Metallica continue their place at the top.
If you got to say that Elvis was as big as he could get in rock and roll at his time, you'd have to say Metallica is as big as rock and roll can get at this time.